Good morning, everyone. This is Nathan Lindorf with The Rational Independent. Today we are going to Newsweek, and we're going to be chatting a little bit about Ron DeSantis, because he is just the favorite whipping boy right now of the left. Seems like article after article really wants to make people cranky with him. Burger Bar sues Ron DeSantis over ban on adult live shows. A restaurant in Orlando is suing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over his law that bans children from attending adult live performances, saying it affects their business and is a violation of free speech. We'll get a little bit into the reporting on this one, but I want to start out kind of high level. I agree with the thesis. This kind of regulation does affect businesses, and it does affect the exercise of speech. That is accurate. But the nature of a society of laws requires that we all must accept some restrictions. And the question then becomes, since we're not anarchists, what restrictions are appropriate and what are not? The challenge is much of this reporting takes, like we talked about yesterday with moral framing, it takes a moral stand, and it engages with its audience's own sense of right and wrong, and wants to kind of hijack that to their own purposes. So their argument largely builds around, hey, look, these things you care about, they're being attacked by this person that you like, which means they must not be a good person. They must be a monster. And therefore we shouldn't support them politically, and we shouldn't support what they do. However, the other side can report on the same set of facts, but frame it the other way and make the case that their opponents are monsters. So framing alone is not enough, although reporters will do their best to make the framing do the heavy lifting. The crux of this distinction is simply this. The people who support Ron DeSantis and his efforts to politically address a cultural problem, they believe that it's morally wrong to intentionally expose a minor child to sexually explicit content. And as near as I can tell amongst transgender advocates, they believe that's a moral right. They think it's a good thing. This is a rock and a hard place. These are two opponents that they're looking at the same movie, but they're seeing two opposite stories. Everyone has the same set of facts, but the implications that we take from those facts lead us to opposite conclusions. Where politics is most effective is in arenas where compromise does not jeopardize morality. For instance, if you are debating between a 15% tax rate and a 20% tax rate, or debating about the difference in effectiveness between computer-assisted, database-assisted policing versus police officers patrolling as they wish. These are issues of policy that need to be addressed, and need to be discussed, and they can be tweaked one way or another. They can be compromised on. They can be bartered with. That's all fine. That is the stuff that politics performs best at. One of the reasons why we say politics is downstream of culture, and for me, that culture is downstream of religion, is because there are certain types of problems that if a political actor tries to solve them, he usually can create a bunch of other problems afterwards. So let's take, with this instance, I actually kind of agree with the argument that these laws interfere with the conduct of this business and interfere with speech taking place in that private venue. But if that restriction achieves the moral good of protecting small children, then that's a good thing. It's currently illegal to give a tattoo to a 6-year-old. If you're a commercial business and someone brings in their 6-year-old child and says, I want you to put a tattoo on them, and you do, you've broken the law. In other words, your artistic expression has been limited. Potential customers have been reduced from you. You're not allowed to include these customers. No one's complaining about this law. So just because you're restricting speech, just because you're restricting business, that doesn't automatically mean that it's the wrong move. Yes, you are. And some restriction is morally right. You're making a permanent change to a young child before they have the ability to understand the long-term implications of that permanent change. Speaking of tattoos. So, as is often the case with reporting, we throw in a little chaff just to confuse the issue. The bill, which is seen as a way to target drag acts, as DeSantis and other Republican figures vow to crack down on the LGBTQ plus friendly performances states that a business will be at risk of losing its license because if it is found to have admitted a child to an adult live performance. The text of the law refers to liquor licensing regulation. For all of you out there who are truly against government regulation, you have to ask the question, why is the government in charge of regulating liquor? It's a very lucrative part of the business, and they've got their hands all the way up in that business. So the government is using its regulatory framework to try and mess with the behavior of private businesses. This is a problem writ large all across American society. The interesting thing is, here, the left, the pro-LGBTQ, etc. people, the left has suddenly found their libertarian streak, saying, wait, no, we don't like it when the government uses its control over valuable pieces of business infrastructure to control private action, except for everywhere else where we really like it. Hamburger Mary's has featured events such as bingo, trivia, and comedy hosted by drag acts in the past. The restaurant also hosts a, quote, family-friendly, unquote, drag show on Sundays that children are invited to attend. So the way they're framing this is why I call this chaff. The way they're framing it, they're acting as though you have this really broad-reaching, vague regulation that if the wrong politician gets a whiff of you doing something that is cute and reasonable and fine, but it could be seen to violate this law, then you could lose your liquor license and go out of business. There's a lot of restaurants, that's where their profit margin is. A lot of restaurants don't make any money on meals. They're barely breaking even, if they're lucky. They make their money selling liquor. Here's why I call that chaff. Speaking of ordering, we cover this first couple of paragraphs, and then down the road, reporters get to choose how to order their speech, and it's very effective because people lose interest as they go along and your audience is shrinking and shrinking, but they want to be seen as professionally consistent, and so they will usually include information that runs counter to their initial argument, but they'll hide it in the middle or chop it up in pieces and make it difficult to see, but it's there if you look for it. About 2/3 of the way down the article, SB 1483, which is the law in question, defines an adult live performance. That's useful. Any show, exhibition, or other presentation in front of a live audience that in whole or in part depicts or simulates nudity, sexual contact, sexual excitement, or specific sexual activities. The measure states this includes lewd conduct or the lewd exposure of prosthetic or imitation genitals or breasts, shows appealing to prurient, shameful, or morbid interests, and patently offensive displays without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for the age of the child present. I'm kind of surprised that law didn't already exist. I feel like exposing children to prurient interests, that's a fun word, is not acceptable in civil society. This is a non-starter. For those of you who happen to be listening to me who don't live on the right, there are people on the right willing to go all the way to the wall on this. They are very, very worked up about this. This is not an issue that is open much to compromise. For many people, children are the line in the sand. And I have to say, I get that reasoning. I empathize with it. I soften my action a little bit in association with it, but I empathize with it. There are many, many people who say, do whatever you want as an adult. You mess with the kids, and this is going to get real nasty real fast. I believe in speech. I believe in debate. I believe in rationality. I believe in persuasion far before any sort of extreme action. At the same time, if those things aren't working, what are you going to do? The political grind continues. There are many people who are very upset at Ron DeSantis right now. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Good old Ron sure is comfortable putting a bullseye on his back or on his front. He's definitely taking shots. And as a politician, particularly someone willing to go up against Donald Trump, that's an important characteristic. Because if you're unwilling to take some heat, you're not going to make it. And I think it's funny because Donald Trump in 2016 got kind of famous because he sucked up all the air in the room and he was very bombastic and he just shot down one candidate after another. Most of those candidates were wimps. What I mean by wimps is that there's a certain breed of politician that approaches politics without realizing that it is a contact sport. you are eventually going to run into someone who wants to, rhetorically, punch you in the face. And if you're not ready for that, you're going to lose to that person, especially if they can do it in a charming way that wins the crowd while punching you in the face. That's Donald Trump's shtick. This has been attributed to many people, but I prefer Mike Tyson's version. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. You could see in the 2016 primary, these candidates that showed up and expected a nice, polite, back and forth, a nice, these are the topics that are within bounds, and anything outside that I'm not gonna have to worry about. And what they got was Donald Trump. And one by one, he just knocked him down. I mean, Jeb Bush, supposedly heir apparent to the Bush dynasty, which, by the way, so glad we don't have any Bushes in office anymore. He's giving events where he gives a laugh line and there's no response. And he's on video saying, please clap. That's bad. That's really bad for a politician. And in a debate, Donald Trump points it out, calls him low energy Jeb. Jeb Bush is done because he was low energy. And Jeb never recovered from that. He had no response to that. It remains to be seen how the Republican primary is going to go. It's going to make for some interesting television. But I think Ron DeSantis, with the way he's acting with the Florida legislature behind him, is showing a willingness to take the fight to the other cultural side. He's willing to engage through the tool of politics with the culture as it relates to these very political hot topics, these sensitive hot topics. Good for him. And he's getting punched in the face over and over again by the mainstream media, which means, hopefully, that when Donald Trump does it, Ron DeSantis doesn't suddenly go, wait, what just happened? And gets knocked out of the game. I think the nomination process is always better, in my opinion, when there is a vigorous debate, when there is strong competition. I don't ascribe to the idea that if you compete in a primary, you're going to weaken the winner. That's not how competition works. That's not how human nature works. If you have a quality candidate who can stand up to scrutiny, that's what the nomination process is supposed to find for you. If you can't handle the pressure of a friendly Republican primary, then what are you going to do when the mainstream media gets a hold of you and lies about you endlessly and slanders you and defames you and cuts you off, incorrectly edits you, and does all sorts of fun rhetorical tricks to get people mad at you or to discredit you? You think you're going to be prepared for that if you go through a primary where that pressure isn't applied? So I look forward to the primary season. I look forward to a vigorous contest. I look forward to Donald Trump throwing some real wild stuff at Ron DeSantis. After all, for those of you who don't recall, he accused Ted Cruz's father of being the Zodiac killer. There's a deep cut for you. Why not? Let's call your dad a serial killer. Are you ready for that? No, he wasn't. But hopefully, Ron DeSantis might be. That's my Reddit rant for today. Good luck out there.